Picture this. You are floating in the crystal clear, sun-drenched waters of the Egadi Islands, right? Just off the coast of Sicily.
Oh, yeah. It is a stunning, historically rich paradise down there.
Exactly. And below you, scattered across the seafloor, are the remnants of ancient shipwrecks spanning centuries of Mediterranean trade.
Right, like massive Roman cargo ships.
Yeah, ancient lead anchors and sprawling piles of clay amphorae that have been resting in the white sand for literally thousands of years.
It's incredible. From the surface, it feels incredibly peaceful, you know?
It really does. But what you can't see, what is hidden beneath that picturesque water, is a quiet, ongoing battle.
Right. It is literally a battle for history itself.
Yeah, because those Egadi Island shipwrecks, as beautiful and significant as they are actively being dismantled.
And are being looted piece by piece.
And the challenge for modern archaeologists isn't just about, throwing on scuba gear and hunting for wrecks.
No. The real puzzle, and arguably the much harder one, is messaging the people who interact with them.
And that is our mission for you today on this deep dive. We are looking at a truly fascinating report from the year 2001.
Right, written by the maritime archaeologist Jeremy Green.
Exactly. He prepared this document for a Sicilian restoration agency.
Yeah.
And looking at it now, it is essentially a master blueprint for saving ancient underwater treasures from modern looters.
It really is. We're going to uncover the incredible mix of human psychology, grueling diving logistics, and, what was for 2001 absolutely cutting-edge technology.
Right, all the stuff required to map and protect these sites.
And what makes this report such a remarkable document is that it treats marine archaeology not just as a hard science, but as a deeply complex social issue.
Yeah, because the Egadi Islands have a long, entrenched history of local diving. The sea is quite literally their backyard.
Exactly. Before an archaeological team can even think about deploying sonar or mapping a debris field, they have to navigate the human element.
They need to understand exactly who is down there in the water and why these 2,000-year-old sites are in danger in the first place. Okay, let's unpack this, because the report breaks down the underwater landscape into 3 distinct depth zones.
And it observes how depth totally dictates human interaction.
Exactly. First, you have the shallow wrecks, which is anything under 30 meters.
Right. These are heavily dived, very accessible to anyone with standard basic scuba gear.
Yeah, and as a result of that easy access, they are mostly picked clean.
Unfortunately, yeah. Then you have the medium depth, 30 to 60 meters.
Which is kind of the sweet spot, right?
It is. The report notes they are well preserved because they are hard to find and quite dangerous for casual recreational divers.
But they're still in the workable, albeit high-cost range for professional looters and archaeologists.
Exactly. And finally, you have the deep wrecks, over 60 meters, which basically require remotely operated vehicles or ROVs to even reach.
Right, and that specific depth breakdown is what informs the entire strategy of what the field calls cultural resource management, or CRM.
Yeah, the core philosophy of CRM represents a major shift in thinking. Historically, authorities thought that passing strict laws and threatening people with harsh jail time would stop the looting.
But it simply doesn't work, does it?
Not at all. To actually protect the physical resource, you have to fundamentally change public attitudes.
Right, you have to convince the local stakeholders that preserving these sites intact is actually in their own long-term best interest.
Exactly. And we shouldn't dismiss those heavily looted shallow sites either. From an archaeological perspective, even a scattered, broken site contains massive amounts of data if it is rigorously studied.
I was reading the section on the psychology of the local diver, and it is just wild.
Oh, it really is.
You have these individuals who spend their whole lives in these waters, and they know exactly where the undiscovered wrecks are.
Oh.
But they hoard the locations.
The report literally describes it as a dog in the manger attitude.
Yeah. They view a historically priceless Roman shipwreck as their own personal property.
And sometimes they keep it secret just out of a deep-seated distrust of government authority.
Or worse, they keep it secret so they can illegally pull up intact amphorae one by one and sell them on the black market to private collectors.
Right, because the knowledge of a wreck's location is a form of power and currency within that local community.
Exactly.
If a diver reveals a pristine site to the state authorities, they feel they lose their personal ownership of it, and they get nothing in return but a pat on the back while academics take all the credit.
But wait, I have to push back here.
Sure.
If you know people are stealing ancient artifacts, why not just arrest them? Ban diving in those specific grid squares, bring in the marine police to patrol the waters, and shut it down entirely.
I see where you're going with that.
I mean, think about it like a fisherman's secret fishing hole. If you just put up a no fishing sign and threaten fines, they're just going to sneak in at night when the Coast Guard is looking the other way.
Right.
Doesn't heavy-handed law enforcement just drive the looting further underground?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that is the exact trap traditional law enforcement falls into globally.
Oh, okay.
And it is the precise reason Jeremy Green's report proposes a completely different, ingenious alternative. Instead of treating the local diving community as the enemy to be policed, the CRM plan aims to turn them into active stakeholders.
How do you flip that switch, though?
By using incentives and systemic integration. The report suggests offering civil rewards for discovering or revealing new sites.
So, like, paying them off.
Well, this doesn't necessarily mean handing out piles of cash. It means offering official public recognition that permanently ties the local diver's name to the historical discovery.
Oh, interesting.
Provided, of course, that the site hasn't been deliberately looted by them first. It appeals to legacy rather than secrecy.
That makes a lot of sense.
And perhaps the most brilliant proposal was regarding the commercial dive charter operators. These were the locals taking tourists out on boats every single day.
Right.
The report suggests making them official inspectors.
Oh, giving them a title. That is smart.
It gives them a vested, sustainable financial interest. If a shipwreck is protected and left intact, it becomes a permanent, reliable tourist attraction.
Right. The charter operators can offer a highly unique, value-added experience to their paying clients.
Exactly. To support this, the CRM plan outlined the creation of official underwater wreck trails.
Wreck trails.
Yeah. The idea is to guide the tourists, but do it with zero impact to the site. For instance, they use screw anchors for the surface mooring buoys.
Okay, how are those different?
Well, these anchors are driven straight down deep into the sand rather than using traditional heavy ship anchors with long metal chains.
Oh, right, because those chains would drag across the seafloor and smash ancient pottery whenever the wind changes.
Exactly. They also provide the divers with waterproof guide sheets so they know exactly what historical details they're looking at and, crucially, what they are forbidden to touch.
That's brilliant. And what I found amazing is that this preservation campaign wasn't just happening underwater.
Right, the museum aspect.
Yeah. The report detailed a plan to take the abandoned Floria tuna factory in Favagnana, which was this massive, defunct, cavernous industrial space on the islands, and transform it into a dedicated maritime museum.
The logic is so sound. If you can make the general, non-diving public fall in love with their unseen underwater heritage, the community's own social pressure to stop looting grows organically.
It's a brilliant way to solve the human problem. But assuming you successfully convince the community to stop plundering, you still have an ocean to search.
Right, you have to actually go out and find the undiscovered wrecks.
And right around the time this report was being written, a massive global event completely upended how archaeologists search the oceans.
It was an overnight paradigm shift for marine surveying that is hard to overstate.
I was absolutely floored by this detail. On May 1st, 2000, the United States government turned off something called Selected Availability, or SA, for the Global Positioning System. Before that specific day, the military was intentionally scrambling GPS signals for civilian use. If you bought a GPS unit, it had a massive built-in margin of error of about 200 meters.
Which is huge when you're looking for a shipwreck.
Right. Then overnight, the military flipped a switch, and standard, off-the-shelf civilian GPS suddenly had a margin of error of just 1.8 meters.
It changed everything.
To put that in perspective for you listening, the smartphone in your pocket right now uses this exact same unscrambled technology.
And that single executive decision made a whole host of conventional, highly cumbersome maritime surveying techniques largely redundant.
Suddenly, an archaeological team could accurately map a complex search grid on the open ocean using a handheld device that cost a few $100s.
However, as the report meticulously points out, this newfound precision brought a brand new, incredibly frustrating problem.
Yes.
Specifically regarding map datums.
The datum trap. I love this part because it is the perfect setup for a disaster.
It really is.
Imagine you have a classic pirate's treasure map, and a big red X marks the spot. You have your hyper-accurate modern compass, so you walk precisely to the coordinates on the map.
Okay.
But what you don't realize is that your map was drawn by someone who thought north was actually 3 streets over. You are going to completely miss the treasure.
That's a great way to look at it. The report explains that the traditional Italian map datum is roughly 100 meters different from the standard WGS-84 datum used by global satellite GPS.
Wow, 100 meters.
Yeah, so if an archaeologist plots a highly accurate GPS coordinate onto a local Italian nautical chart without running the mathematical conversion, they will be searching 100 meters away from the actual shipwreck.
It is a chilling thought for anyone in the field. You could spend thousands of dollars organizing a dive, swim down, and be staring at completely empty sand.
Thinking the wreck has been entirely stolen or destroyed simply because of a geographic translation error.
Right. But assuming the team has their datums perfectly aligned, the real work of remote sensing begins.
And in 2001, the strategy meant relying heavily on side-scan sonar and magnetometers.
The side-scan sonar part sounds like something straight out of a Cold War submarine movie.
It does, doesn't it?
They tow a torpedo-shaped device called a towfish behind the boat, and it pings acoustic beams out to the sides. But the report says it doesn't actually see the shipwreck, right? How does that work?
Well, it relies on acoustic shadows.
Acoustic shadows.
Yeah, the sonar pulses sound waves across the seafloor. When those sound waves hit an object sticking up from the bottom, they bounce back.
Okay.
But directly behind that object, there is an acoustic void, a shadow where no sound waves hit the sand.
Oh, I see.
By measuring the precise length of that acoustic shadow on their monitors and knowing exactly how high the towfish is flying above the seabed, archaeologists can use basic trigonometry to calculate the exact height of the anomaly.
That's wild. It is incredibly effective for finding wrecks on flat, sandy plains. But the report mentions that if the seabed is rocky or uneven, a shipwreck is almost impossible to differentiate from natural rock formations using just sonar.
Right, which is why they bring in a magnetometer.
Which detects variations in the Earth's magnetic field caused by iron.
Correct.
And here's where it gets really interesting. I was reading the equipment list, and I got totally stuck on this. Magnetometers look for iron.
They do.
But we are talking about ancient Roman and Greek ships. They are made entirely of wood and filled with clay amphorae.
Right.
They don't have massive iron cannons or steel hulls. Was that a typo in the report? Why use a magnetometer to look for clay pots?
It seems completely counterintuitive, I know, but it comes down to the microscopic physics of how pottery is actually made.
Really?
Physics. Specifically, something called the Curie point.
Okay, what is that?
Think of the clay used to make those ancient amphorae as being filled with microscopic iron oxide particles.
Okay, I'm with you.
Normally, their individual magnetic fields are all jumbled up and point in random directions. But when you put that clay into a high-temperature kiln to fire it, and it passes a specific temperature threshold, that's the Curie point, those tiny iron particles essentially lose their rigid magnetic alignment.
Oh, well.
It's like taking an Etch-a-Sketch and giving it a really hard shake to clear the screen.
Oh, that's a great way to picture it. It resets the clay.
Exactly. And as the pottery cools back down below that temperature, those microscopic iron particles lock back into place.
Okay.
But this time, they align themselves with the Earth's ambient magnetic field at that exact moment in history.
That is wild.
It locks in a magnetic signature. It's a phenomenon called thermoremnant magnetism. So theoretically, every single clay pot acts like a very weak, short bar magnet.
That is mind-blowing. So a cargo ship carrying hundreds of these magnetically charged pots should light up the magnetometer perfectly.
You would certainly hope so. But the report highlights the incredible story of the Kyrenia wreck in Cyprus to explain why this theory often fails in practice.
What happened there?
Well, that 3rd century BC wreck had over 400 amphorae in its hold.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, but because they were stacked completely randomly as cargo, their individual magnetic fields pointed in every conceivable direction.
Oh no, let me guess, they canceled each other out.
They effectively canceled each other out. The magnetometer barely registered a blip.
Wow. It's like a room full of 400 people all shouting at the exact same volume. It just becomes white noise.
That is a perfect analogy. And this raises an important question for survey design, you know. You can never rely on just one piece of technology.
Because the failure of the magnetometer on the Kyrenia wreck proves that you must use overlapping search methods.
Exactly. Remote sensing only provides anomalies. It doesn't provide visual confirmation.
Which brings us to the escalation of this whole process. Because once the sonar or the magnetometer logs an anomaly, the technology maxes out.
Right. A human being actually has to get into the water to verify it.
The report mentions visual searches, which sounds simple enough. Just swim and look.
Oh, it's never that simple.
Right. It describes something called a swim line with some very specific, exhausting-sounding math attached to it. What makes a visual search so difficult?
It requires immense physical discipline and spatial awareness. Searching a featureless, murky ocean floor without getting horribly lost is incredibly difficult.
I can imagine.
For a swim line, you have a group of divers spread out horizontally, holding onto a taut rope. They swim forward in a straight line, sweeping the area.
Okay, so like a sweeping net.
But to ensure they don't miss a single artifact hidden in the sand, they have to calculate their swimming altitude based on their spacing.
Wait, what?
They must swim at a height above the seabed that is exactly half the distance separating them on the rope.
Let me get this straight. So if they are 4 meters apart on the rope, they have to maintain exactly 2 meters of height above the sand.
Yes, it is all about overlapping fields of vision.
Oh, I see.
If you are swimming half your separation distance above the bottom, your visual field naturally overlaps perfectly with the diver to your left and the diver to your right.
Okay, that makes sense.
It mathematically guarantees that every single square inch of the seafloor is looked at by 2 different pairs of eyes.
It's like being a human lawnmower in a giant murky field. You just mow back and forth.
Exactly.
But the report says if the area is too big for swimming, they use towed sleds. And reading about this sounded wildly dangerous.
It can be.
A diver is literally towed behind a moving boat on a sled to cover ground quickly. But the report is very specific with its warnings. It says the diver must be in a prone position on a saddle, and you should never, ever use a simple manta board without proper support.
Right, because the physical forces involved are immense because of the water drag.
Yeah.
If you were just holding onto a simple wooden manta board being pulled by a boat, the sheer water resistance will tear your arms out of their sockets very quickly.
Ouch.
A supported sled with a saddle takes the strain off the diver's body, and it uses adjustable depressors like underwater wings, allowing the diver to steer smoothly up and down over the topography without fighting the water pressure.
That sounds much better. But even when you survive the sled and finally find the site, your job has only just begun.
It's true.
The next phase is surveying and mapping the site, which requires doing complex mathematics while suffering from nitrogen narcosis.
It is not for the faint of heart.
Math is hard enough for me on dry land. I can't imagine doing it in a wetsuit.
Well, the standard traditional method for 2D surveying underwater is trilateration.
How does that work?
You establish 2 fixed, rigid reference points on the seafloor, say 2 steel stakes driven deeply into the sand. You measure the exact distance between them to form your baseline.
Okay, got my baseline.
Then, to map a piece of an amphora, you take a physical tape measure from stake A to the artifact and another tape measure from stake B to the artifact.
Like drawing 2 circles.
Exactly. Where those 2 distance arcs intersect on your waterproof drawing board is the exact location of the object.
But the report warns about a specific nightmare scenario called the cocked hat error.
Oh, the dreaded cocked hat.
Yeah, if a team uses 3 tape measures from 3 different stakes, to be extra precise, and just one diver misreads their tape measure by a few inches, your 3 arcs won't intersect at a perfect single point when you draw it up.
Right, they form a little triangle of uncertainty in the middle, the cocked hat.
If human error causes this constantly, how does a computer program actually fix it? Does it just guess which diver was wrong?
It doesn't guess. It uses a rigorous statistical technique called least squares adjustment.
Math to the rescue.
This was where the software revolution of the late 90s, specifically programs like Peter Holt's Site Surveyor, changed everything.
So how did Site Surveyor fix the cocked hat?
Instead of relying on a single baseline, just a few measurements, divers would take dozens of overlapping measurements between all the artifacts and all the control points,
Creating like a net of measurements.
They create a massive interconnected web of data. When you plug that web into the software, the program averages out the margin of error across the entire system.
Now that's smart.
It mathematically forces the web into the best possible overall geometric fit.
And it spits out what they call residuals.
Yes, the residual is basically the program flagging the specific human error.
So it tells you who messed up.
Basically, if 90 measurements in the web agree perfectly, but one measurement is pulling the web out of shape, the software isolates it.
Wow.
It tells the archaeologist instantly, diver number 3 misread their tape measure on artifact number 40.
That's incredible. You don't have to scrap the whole map. You just send someone down to remeasure that one specific line.
Exactly.
It's like having a robotic editor for your underwater math. But here's the thing. All of this trilateration seems designed for a flat, 2D sandy bottom.
It is, yeah.
So what happens when a ship crashes into a jagged reef and leaves a 3-story pile of chaotic debris? Tape measures aren't going to work there.
No, they are not.
The CRM plan demands mapping the third dimension, and the methods they used range from hilariously low-tech to absolute cutting edge.
The contrast between the low-tech and high-tech 3D methods in this report is striking.
It really is.
When dealing with complex three-dimensional debris fields, archaeologists had to get incredibly creative. The bed frame method used on the James Matthews wreck is a perfect example of physical ingenuity.
I love the bed frame method. Because they needed exact X, Y, and Z coordinates for hundreds of items stacked on top of each other, they built a massive, rigid grid out of metal bars and stakes directly over the shipwreck.
It's basically a giant underwater scaffold.
They literally leveled it underwater using a standard carpenter's spirit level.
Which is pretty funny to picture.
Right. Then they had this sliding H-shaped bar that moves smoothly along the tracks of the frame. They'd slide the H directly over an artifact, drop a plumb bob down on a string to physically touch the item, and read the depth measurement off the frame.
It is highly effective and very accurate, but it is astronomically time-consuming.
I can imagine.
You are meticulously transferring a complex physical reality into a numerical matrix, one single plumb bob drop at a time. It requires hundreds of hours underwater.
It is exactly like building a life-size 3D printer frame over a shipwreck, just so you can manually map it dot by dot. It sounds physically exhausting.
Which is why the high-tech alternative photogrammetry was such a massive breakthrough.
Right.
In 2001, this meant using specially calibrated 15mm Nikonos film cameras, or the brand new, incredibly expensive 3.3 megapixel digital cameras.
3.3 megapixels. The nostalgia for early digital cameras is real.
It was absolute state-of-the-art at the time. The goal of photogrammetry was to take overlapping photographs of the entire site and use computer software to extract 3D measurements from the images.
Sounds easier than the plumb bob.
In theory. But to do that, the software needs reference points, common, distinct features it can recognize from multiple different angles.
Oh, I see.
On a land ruin, you can use the sharp corner of a brick window. But underwater, an amphora looks exactly like the amphora next to it.
They're all just identical clay jugs.
Exactly. It is just a featureless curve covered in algae. Early software would completely fail to process it.
So how did they solve the visual complexity problem?
What's fascinating here is the sheer problem-solving brilliance of an archaeologist named Tufan Turanli working on the Tektis wreck in Turkey.
What did he do?
He was staring at a cargo hold of thousands of identical amphorae, and he needed to map them using early software called Photomodeler. So he created special waterproof plastic labels. Each label had a registration number and 3 highly specific dots printed on it, forming a precise geometric triangle.
Almost like an early QR code.
Very much a precursor to it. Divers swam down and slapped these triangular dot labels directly onto the circular mouth of every single amphora in the wreck, always pointing the apex of the triangle toward the amphora's handle.
That's so clever.
When they photographed the wreck, the software didn't have to understand the complex, featureless curve of the ancient pottery. It just tracked the strict geometry of those 3 high-contrast dots.
Oh, wow.
By calculating exactly how that triangle skewed and warped in different photographs from different angles, the software calculated the exact 3D spatial orientation, the pitch, the yaw, and the roll of every single piece of cargo in the hold.
That is absolute genius. They used a simple roll of physical stickers to allow the computer software to completely bypass the visual chaos of the site.
It revolutionized how fast they could map a wreck without disturbing a single grain of sand.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener?
Wow.
What Jeremy Green's 2001 report proves is that underwater archaeology is not just some romantic Indiana Jones adventure where you dig up old pots. It is an absolute masterclass in high-stakes project management.
It truly encompasses everything from local sociology and conflict resolution to advanced mathematics and mechanical engineering.
You have to negotiate with stubborn local divers and figure out how to turn them into your strongest allies.
Right.
You have to understand the quirks of military satellite networks so your maps don't lie to you.
And you have to understand the thermal physics of ancient clay, perform least square statistical adjustments while breathing compressed air.
And build ingenious physical rigs, whether it's a giant underwater bed frame or a roll of 3-dot stickers all, just to digitize human history.
This raises an important question about where all this preservation effort is heading.
What do you mean?
Well, if the technology in 2001 allowed us to create wireframe 3D models of shipwrecks using 3-dot labels and 3 megapixel cameras, think about what is happening right now.
Oh, yeah.
We are rapidly approaching an era where anyone will be able to dive these Egadi Island sites in completely photorealistic virtual reality right from the comfort of their living room.
You won't even have to get wet or worry about the bends.
And that is the provocative thought I want to leave you with.
Yeah.
If technology completely democratizes access to these incredible underwater museums, does it ultimately save the physical sites from being loved to death by thousands of real-world tourists?
Right.
Or does removing the physical danger, the freezing cold water, and the sheer exclusivity of the dive somehow diminish the profound mystique of the shipwreck itself?
Wow. If anyone can see it from their couch, does it lose its magic? That is a fascinating thought to leave you with. Next time you look out over a body of water, whether it's the crystal clear Egadi Islands or your own local coastline, remember the incredible, grueling lengths people are going to protect the ghosts resting in the sand below. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the world around you, and we'll catch you next time.